Hello, everyone, whoever could join us. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty with the Facebook Live, so we're gonna stream it on Facebook later. And today I'm here. My name is Roman Hanis with the PITT Institute, for those who are not familiar, and I'm here with Robin, who is a holistic coach. Hi, Robin. Oh, hold on.
There we go. Hey, Roman, how you doing?
Good, wonderful to see you.
You too?
So today's conversation is about psychoactive plants and who are they for and what they are for.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can start the conversation with the overview of the psychoactive plants. Today we have a lot of access to that in our modern society, and at the same time, with that also comes responsibility, which is a more conscious and intentional use, and how the same thing that can bring benefit can also bring harm. So you want to share a little bit about that, Robin?
Yeah, for sure. We were talking this last week about this, and it was something that came through that I thought would be a great conversation to have in terms of just kind of going over what plant medicine is and how do they work. And I think maybe if we start there, and then we can kind of go into the application of it and who it's for, meaning based on what it is and also the intention, how we can align people to know if it's a type of work that they're ready to do. So I guess, Roman, just discussing a little bit from your context, what plant medicine is and how it actually works. So a little bit of that history, the stuff that you actually share in your retreats. So if anybody's interested in an amazing opportunity to learn not just about themselves, but also the history of plant medicine. Roman speaks to this in great texture in the retreats, but maybe just share a bit about that first.
Well, I can share that there has been thousands of years of human experience invested into the unraveling the potential of our organism in a sustainable way, in a healing and supportive environment. And so this is something not to be overlooked. And of course, plant medicines, they are not for everyone. And beyond the basic um, contraindications with specific health conditions, whether physical or mental, there is also a place in one's life and an essential foundation of one's direction in life and a certain experience in the training of one's mind, of one's consciousness, so that the plant medicines can be beneficial. Of course, they can also be beneficial as an introduction into that if it's done in a gentle and supportive way with a lot of guidance. But then it's not something that has been utilized in human experience as a way to just create entertainment for the monkey mind. Or today is very popular with plant medicines to approach them so that people can disassociate. So I know that there are lots of weekend warriors out there who have their daily routine and very involved in society and have lots of responsibilities. And then the approach towards sacred plant medicines is kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna blank out or black out, and I'm just gonna completely lose myself and in a way get a certain respite from the grind of everyday life. But then that's also not how the plant medicines were intended to be utilized by the ancestors, where the whole point was not to disassociate, but to learn how to maintain lucid awareness in the midst of the most chaotic intensities of nature, of our lives. To remember oneself as a channel, to heal one's relationship with life, to purify the resistance towards life, where disassociation is another defense mechanism. We can see it with trauma often manifesting with people who disassociate, and that's one of the defense mechanisms. And so it's important to acknowledge in that way.
Yes, I just from a Westerner's point of view, I think we've been trained or conditioned to take a pill or to take a medicine, and that is going to fix our problems. We don't have to actually do anything to change the root of why that occurred, whether it's a sickness or disease or a depression, but we can take this medicine or this pill and just go on with our day. And in the plant medicine world, can you share how, and you kind of said that with the disassociation, but how that can be harmful to just assume that I'm going to go down and do ayahuasca and fix all my problems. And then I don't have to, do anything about it. I can just take a big dose and think that that's going to be the answer. Can you speak to a little bit about that mindset, especially from a Westerner's perspective?
Yeah, this perspective of a magical pill and magical potion, and that is very related to the modern mindset, and that also involves I don't have to do anything about it. I'm just gonna take this magical potion. I'm gonna take a lot of it, and it's gonna fix me. And I don't have to put any of my own effort, right? And that also relates to disassociation, where I don't have to engage with the effects of the medicine and learn how to open up to them and how to recognize what is happening in my being, get to know myself in that process, right? So people go kind of like, I'm gonna go for this psychedelic show, but not so much to work on myself. And then the show will do everything for me. So that's kind of the mentality that can be harmful, because the plant medicines, it's not necessarily that they are healing, because there's also a lot of people who use it not for healing, including in its traditional setting in the Amazon. So the healing really has to come from oneself, the healing intention. Consciousness is the main healing agent. Everything can support consciousness, but nothing can substitute it. And so then how do I engage with my own life experience, with my own healing? What context do I have for engaging with the plant medicine in an intentional and sustainable way? Otherwise, the plant medicines, they're kind of, in psychology, they're referred to sometimes as the psychopumps, which is basically amplify they amplify the psychic energy in our being. And so if my energy is not intentional and I'm not willing to become aware of that, then that gets amplified. And then all of my issues, they just become so overwhelming that I disassociate. Right?
That is, yeah.
So then that becomes a habit of even engaging with plant medicines. I'm going to go into this experience and I'm already used to disassociating. And then it's not really healing those deep traumas or issues in one's life.
Yeah, from my experience and you know, working with you over the last 6 years, and in that introduction, for me, there was a there was a calling to do something different, even though I was unaware of what ayahuasca was at that point in my introduction, unlike some people who already kind of know. But it was an opening for me to face everything that I avoided all of my life. And over this course of time, I've realized that once you know what you've been unconscious to, if you continue to work with plant medicine, it will continue amplifying, just like you said, um, like an energy that is just poking you in the side, saying, "I'm still here unless you're going to really face me." Because to me, you see the things potentially in plant medicine, or you start getting a deeper understanding of your unconsciousness, and then after that, and we've discussed this as well, the real ceremony and the real hero's journey begins, because once you're aware, once you're conscious of the things that you're attached to, of the things that you're running from, of the unauthentic parts of yourself, it almost becomes more difficult, because if you're not ready to take that step to really bring those parts of yourself to a transformative place where they're ready to evolve into a deeper consciousness that I can actually work with, then it becomes, yeah, it becomes a harder journey, because you can't push away what you already know, right? So for me, it was really step by step taking on the things that started unfolding in my work with medicine, and taking one step towards transforming one thing or working with one thing and getting deeper with it and really getting to know it now that I'm aware of it. But just because I'm aware of it doesn't mean it's going to fix itself. I have to actually engage in reality in this realm for it to blossom, for it to really um, be something that helps change my life or evolve my life in a way of better being, let's say, where I feel more fulfilled and I feel more spacious to live in the everyday grind of coming back to the material world. So my whole point is saying, with the ego, it will always continue to show up until I want to transform that ego to serve my higher self. Plant medicine doesn't take the ego away. It might show you where it's at and where it's causing suffering. But until I engage with it fully and get to know it and do the work outside of the medicine circle, that's where the things can really be a blessing, and they can be a gift to be able to work with. But if I am not ready for that, and I have no groundwork whatsoever to really want to learn more about myself, then pushing that down is like pushing down a beach ball underneath a swimming pool. It's going to want to bust up again in another form or another way. So yes, I agree. Like you think you're going to get, it doesn't make things easier. It amplifies what is limiting your potential, your spiritual birth. So if that's not something you're ready to face, and you're wanting to stay right where you are, which is okay too, I would just say using plant medicine right now might not be the thing to do. But if you're feeling a calling to really get that nudge and feel supported to understand how to work with the unconscious, to
So,
bring more, yep,
so you're basically talking about integration, right?
yes.
So they need to integrate, and that's the whole point of these traditions. We have a glimpse in a ceremony, and then we see the gap from that state of being that is open, that is tender, that is heart-centered, and then we see the gap between that and everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
then the work is about bridging that gap. Because initially that gap might be quite far off, right? It can be a very big gap.
Mhm.
And so there has to be that intention no matter how big that gap is. At least at first to start believing that it's possible to bridge that gap.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so then that becomes very beneficial. So then it becomes a step-by-step spiritual path that is not just based on the random phantasmagorical experience, but it starts to develop greater meaning, and each step leads us to the next one.
Mhm. 100%. And I know for me it's always a work in progress, but um I really have to say that I enjoy the journey that I've been given in this working towards a complete self, a wholeness of knowing all the dark and all the light of myself, which ayahuasca brings to me. You know, she works in the underworld. She's not she's not bringing down just the golden light all, in that way. She works with the things that are heavy, dark, and unconscious. Can you share a little bit about that, Roman? Like how ayahuasca specifically works and what energies she's connected to in that way?
Well, ayahuasca has been utilized in a skillful way by the ancestors, um, and it's up to us to engage with it in a skillful way. So, for the ancestors, it wasn't just about ayahuasca, it was a much greater cultural context. And so, it's with other sacred plant medicine traditions. And so it wasn't, ayahuasca was an integral element within the ancestral tradition, but it wasn't the focus or the main center. The focus was the awakening of inherent potential within each human being. And that was referred to as the journey of remembrance or the path of the mastery of love, where one has to recognize one's own life from early childhood and how this life is leading towards the actualization of the heart potential. And so then ayahuasca teaches about that science of the heart-mind connection. But one has to understand and immerse into the ayahuasca already with a certain foundation of that inner science, the inner knowing. So then that it can become a discipline. Otherwise, it's just a random show. So there has to be this deeper inner perspective and beginning to relate to it from one's own life experience. So that is so essential. Because yeah, of course, the sacred plant medicines, traditionally they've always entailed reverence and respect from the people who approach them. So there had to be a deeper meaning, not just approach it randomly um, and unintentionally. But more than that, so people know about the reverence, and sometimes I see people get lost in that. It's kind of like this holy cow worshipping type of experience. But in ancient times, it also entailed having common sense. So not just blind worshipping of external beings or people or entities, but starting to develop one's own sense and engaging with reality from a place of deeper intuitive knowing and interconnectedness, relatedness. So starting to actually master one's own ability to engage with life, with reality. So this path of self-mastery is something that can be ignored nowadays. Of course, there has to be the reverence and the respect for the lineage holders, for the tradition, but as important, just as important, is to be aware, to cultivate a connection with one's own inner truth as a state of being. So that is something that is so essential, and that's why also, of course, one can be very unaware, but at least have a good connection with someone who is trustworthy and has experience and pure intentions, and then to be able to take that guidance and to develop one's own experience-based knowledge, right? The trust, not just blind faith. So that is very essential, right? The direct experience, not blind faith. These are paths of direct experience, and one needs to be willing to face the darkness of the unknown, to discover, not to take things for granted, to question what is happening, and to even question the one who is questioning. Right? And that can be scary, right? So for that, definitely there has to be some foundation.
I know in your retreats, and I've been through in the last 5 years, you always start with the remembrance practice. So you were just touching on that in the opportunity to create space and going over the remembrance practice and going back to the challenging times, or going back to the times that felt joy and freedom, right? So you have these stories or these experiences in your life that maybe you're still hanging on to as a part of an identity, but also just trying to get a reference point of where, first of all the limitations in my remembrance of things I have lost or that I denied at a young age, and it's created a path that's led me maybe to a point where I want to come back home, so to speak. And I know also in the remembrance practice, we also work on remembering the things as an anchor of where we felt our most authentic self, or where we felt joy and freedom. And it's not necessarily attaching to the story of that, but the essence of it, because it does exist in us. So that light, that joy, that love, and then also so we can have a space, an anchor, to start remembering any little fragment of where we've maybe pushed something down so deep that, for me over the last 5 years, it was always about other things coming up in my remembrance. When I first started, I couldn't remember anything. Everything was fine. But the deeper I went into my work, I started seeing in my own life experience where some of these things got shut down. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that type of reflection, that inner work with plant medicine, and why you do it with your participants?
Yes, so this is how I was introduced to sacred plant medicines by my teachers, both from the Amazon and the Andes, where there has to be a foundation of that mind-heart connection training. And the remembrance practice in these traditions is an essential element now that is nowadays often overlooked. But it always has been an essential element of that. Because for the indigenous people, the most essential in their lives is to maintain the fierce innocence. In our modern society, we no longer maintain fierce innocence in our adult lives. It's more of a wounded type of innocence. And so the remembrance practice is not remembrance on a philosophical level, but it's remembrance of certain states of being that are very inherent and natural within us, that we have experienced as children, as infants, that we have experienced even when we were in the mother's womb. Our bodies, our physical organisms have retained that memory of deep nurture, care, unconditional love, support. And so then we come into this world that is seemingly separate, and for the indigenous people, the point is to recognize this entire world as the womb of Mother Nature, and to reconnect to that unconditional love that we have experienced in the mother's womb. So throughout our lives, we have those glimpses, those moments where we are uninhibited, when we are free, when we have creative expression flowing through us, when we can be at ease, where we can feel safe and we can feel tender and open. And so those expressions of nature, they allow the creative energy to flow freely through us. We start to tap into the source of creative energy. And so those moments, they are glimpses, and that's why the remembrance practice, we start to utilize our own life experience to begin mapping the way for our psychic energy to return to where it has originally came from, the source of creative energy. And so then starting to tune in into our own life experience from the past and use it as bookmarks to drop into those same states of being we experienced then, but to bring it into the current moment. For the indigenous people, they see that we were meant to be free and happy, just like birds fly in the sky. And the only thing that prevents us is our own forgetfulness. We get too wrapped up in the mind, in our worries, preoccupations, the concerns of the mundane world that ultimately don't have any meaning. All of those superficial worries we have, no matter how great they seem in everyday life, in the face of death, they start to appear very insignificant. And so then we start to recognize the essential meaning and purpose of our lives. And of course, it's very challenging because our modern world is at such contrast from that. And so then there has to be this continuous reinforcement throughout daily life, not just in ceremonies. And then the ceremonies can provide greater glimpses of those original states that we learn how to treasure, how to maintain in the face of greater and greater adversity, to stay open, to shine the human spirit in the face of adversity. That was the original meaning of the indigenous traditions. So this is a little bit of what I can share in that regard. Of course, there is a lot more to this ancestral science traditions, but that is the basic point of it, is to return home to the heart, to oneself, to tap into the capacity to generate, to awaken unconditional love within oneself instead of unconsciously seeking it in the superficial external world that can never really provide it. Right? We can have little glimpses, tastes of that, but we can never fulfill ourselves through external reflections of our inner states.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was just gonna say, moving into the dream state of plant medicine, and I know you go over the dream work, and I think for me it was like learning to understand what was showing up for me and the symbolism behind that, and using that understanding even in my daily life, looking at the symbols in this realm in as a dream, and using that as a catalyst to tune into my intuition or tune into uh, my spiritual guidance. And I know dream work has been one of those tools for me, learning it with you through ceremony. And I know you engage quite deeply with that in our retreats. But even being able to use that symbolism in real life, and even working with my own archetypes, right? The archetypes that show up maybe unconsciously or as ways to survive situations, and learning to have conversations with them instead of, just reacting, but being able to respond, being able to reclaim my personal authority or personal power, back to who I really am, right? Because I can work with those symbols more consciously. Can you speak a little bit about the dream work aspect of how you use that in your retreats and why you
Yeah,
share it?
of course, that's another essential element of the ancestral wisdom traditions. Again, I've gotten introduced to it both from the Amazon and the Andes, and also the Tibetan tradition, the Jungian psychology, the Buddhist psychology. Different cultures around the world are all pointing to this dreamlike nature of reality.
Mhm.
We can see it in the Hindu tradition as well. In many ancient cultures, we can see this perspective of interconnectedness, reciprocity, the greater organism. Just like in our dreams, we can have experiences with different people, situations, objects, and yet they're all woven from our own psychic fabric, the threads of our psyche. And so, in our everyday world for the indigenous people, this is one collective dream that we are co creating together. And the more consciously we co create it, the better this dream becomes. And so, the dreamlike nature of reality, yeah, of course, I work with dream work that is based on the Ashuar nation from the Amazon perspective, and also Jungian psychology. And people sometimes think that it's also related to dream work, only related to dreams at night. But actually, we can approach our own daily life, our waking life, with the same perspective, and it is very beneficial. That's how the indigenous people actually live. And so these practices, they communicate to us they through the language of nature, which we have to learn in order to make these practices effective. And that of course includes ayahuasca, other plant medicines that speak in the language of metaphor,
Mhm.
in the language of symbolism. And then we can see how our entire life is that language. Each person that we meet, each experience that we have. And yet not seeing the trees behind or the forest behind the trees, and then getting lost in our daily experiences, taking them too literally, and starting to get upset about the little things in life, not realizing that it's actually pointing to this deep inner calling of the
Mhm.
actualization of our potential. So, yeah, the dream language is very essential, so that one is not lost in one's experience in life, not just the daily experience, but the transcendental experience. There is a greater purpose that each one of us has than more than just being an ant in the conveyor belt of society.
Mhm.
And so, yes, of course, the dream language, it goes to the origin of human language, where people did not have specific words to express themselves, and then they utilized their experience with the universe at large to reflect the inner landscape of their being. And so this is something that our human society today, I feel, is deeply longing for. This recognition that we are much more than just what society portrays us to be, that each one of us has this higher purpose in life beyond just living in society based on societal values. There are universal values, and each one of us has a unique contribution towards that if we answer the calling of our hearts. So essentially, that is the dream language.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, it's really created more heart and meaning in my life. And I think kind of taking the conversation and just briefly sharing a little bit. about my journey and my walk. Um, I mean, in the Western world, everyone would probably describe it as a midlife crisis, but whatever. But it was finally just surrendering to the call to return back to my heart, to allow myself to express myself as a whole human, not just one aspect that I found familiar or safe, but being able to open up to all the things that maybe I pushed away for whatever reason in my journey, and being able to open those back up and start discovering who Robin really is without what I just do. And what is the deeper meaning to life? What is the purpose in that? And to be honest, I can't really say there's a purpose. It's really how we create it. How, we are the creators of that, and we are creating our own myth in a way. And we can play the game of being into the conveyor belt, like you said, and chasing the carrot till we find the grave, or we can really play a meaningful role in nature, in spirit, in our soul, and use this body to be a channel to also show others and inspire others to do the same. It's just like this big healing that's happening, I feel, um, in our world now, where people are finding that the things that they've learned or been conditioned to aren't working. It isn't leading them to feeling like they have meaning and purpose in life. There's kind of just an empty box there with a picket fence around it. And I know from my experience, this whole journey has brought me back home. It's allowed me to open up and start a new dream, start a new myth, with my whole self, not just one aspect. And for me, that's where plant medicine has really supported me in that. And it supported me as well because I had a structure. I had tools that I've learned through Paititi as well to continue taking them back and putting them into action. And it isn't about comparing where am I supposed to be compared to this person or that person. It's really about what am I here to experience, and with the time that I have, how fully can I engage in everything to continue pulling the parts in that do have meaning and purpose. So so with that, I found sitting in many circles with you, a lot of people show up to feel supported, and like maybe they ran into a wall. I don't have a meaning in life. I don't have purpose. I don't know what I should do. Um, how are you setting up the retreats to help guide people to take on that path? Because I feel like you can have all the tools, but it's that engagement, it's that hero's journey to really be brave enough to bring the courage to want to find what's meaningful for you, and outside of just the material form, but really tapping into spirit and nature. And ayahuasca or any plant medicines can really remind us of that, remind us of that we are innately connected. uh, but yeah, just speak to like potentially participants around, like at a place in their life where who they are isn't lining up to their heart. And if they were interested in the healing work, how would you support them in that, or how would you guide them into taking that potential nudge or step forward into that exploration?
It was quite an elaborate question.
Okay. Let's speak to, okay. Let me see if I can
But
trim it
it's okay.
down.
You don't have to make it
Okay.
more elaborate. Um,
Sorry about that.
well, these traditions have always been about earth-based spirituality. So it wasn't, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, to disassociate, but to learn how to engage with daily life in a more meaningful and effective way. And so, of course, today's world looks a bit different than how the ancestors lived in the rainforest or in the mountains, but the point of it is the same, which is not to run away from challenges in life. and to see how all of those things that are seen problematic can actually become rites of passage into our greater potential, and continue to learn to trust in the power of the heart, in the wisdom of the heart. And so the retreats, as I said, it's not just about following, going through the motions, but it's about getting real with oneself and applying that to one's own life, and then having tools that are relevant to today's modern world and challenges. Right? It's not so meaningful in today's world, in society, to wear feathers and to do different exotic rituals, but the main ritual is to continue coming back into the heart. And so different practices, different tools, understanding of one's life, the remembrance practice, the dream work approach, they help us to relate with others, to relate with the world around us, to maintain that heart-centered perspective, to not deviate from that, to keep applying that to all of our own expressions in life, the good, bad, and ugly, to learn how to accept oneself, to love oneself unconditionally through all of the experiences and the storms of life. So essentially the practices, they're geared towards that, and it's essential to do something that is relevant to one's life. Because of course, some people may prefer retreats where they go into this fairy tale and it's kind of like a vacation from everyday problems, but then what happens when you get back to everyday problems? Then this vacation doesn't really have much of an impact. But then if instead of a vacation it's an intensive retreat where one learns to recognize one's entire life as a ceremony and engage intentionally with what is happening, develop a map of transformation and return to one's daily life with that perspective, with that blueprint of transformation, then it's a very different effect. So I say that parasites don't take vacations. So when we are on vacation, the parasites, they are working overtime, and then we have to catch up. So then, so it's good to transform one's entire life into a ceremony where there is a continuous stream of heart-centered awareness flowing through.
Yeah, that actually just reminded me of something around, if you think about nature, like nature survived through its own resistance, right? You know, through a storm, you know, a tree doesn't necessarily always fall down, but its roots deepen. You know, a leaf falling from a tree is, you know, just holding on to the water falling from the sky. There's no, like any challenge, what I'm saying with nature, it only allows for a new rebirth. It allows for deeper, deeper meaning and growth. Like nature doesn't happen just because everything's easy, right? Thinking of a butterfly, like a caterpillar coming out and pushing out from its cocoon, right? It needs to have that resistance to develop its wings. And I know for me, learning that if there is resistance or if there is a challenge in my life, it's just showing me that there is this opportunity to look deeper, um, to really continue chipping away at my innate potential. It's not saying that I'm doing something wrong, or it's not saying, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, but really looking at challenges as opportunities to deepen your spiritual path, or continue chipping the things off that need to open the heart more, that heart-mind connection. And so really they're catalysts. And that's, for me, that's what's really been beneficial. And working in ceremony too, it's you continue facing those same things. And how do I continue working with the resistance, the challenge, to continue opening up through that? and exploring the other side, as opposed to hanging on and not wanting to let go because I don't know what's there, but really having that deep trust to do that. And I know for me that resistance and that trust and that surrender has only been for deeper growth. And I would say lightenment for me instead of enlightenment, because I don't even really know what that means. I don't know if I have enough time on this earth in this life to actually reach enlightenment. But what I've kind of changed or the thought process into is lightenment, just taking out how much light can I continue illuminating within myself during this time, to continue unfolding deeper levels of consciousness and meaning. So just sharing a little bit around just what you were talking about there.
Yeah, that's again comes back to heart-centered awareness, cultivation of heart-centered awareness, and continue to bring that into all of those dark places in oneself, where there is this instinctual resistance or inhibition or trauma, and continue to cultivate this perspective of no wrong. There is no good and bad. There is ignorance and wisdom, and not judging oneself for ignorance, because that's an essential step towards wisdom. And so then to continue to cultivate the heart-centered awareness, that is the light, right? You talk about the enlightenment. But the light is the light of heart-centered awareness that we can cultivate with all aspects of ourselves. And that is a discipline. It's a serious discipline because it's often not so easy. And again, this is something that plant medicines can help us with if there is already willingness to do that throughout our everyday life. Right? So that's something that, of course, we do experience in ceremonies, these states of great bliss, but it does not come from pleasure. It comes from the openness of the heart and the recognition of that openness in the face of all of the darkness that may occur. So that is the real happiness for the indigenous people. It's not happiness based on pleasure, but it's happiness based on the openness of the heart in front of all of the pain and problems of life. So that is the light that we are cultivating. And so, yeah, it's good to really establish that foundation. Because my teachers taught me, of course, initially, because I'm so grasping, my happiness is symbolized by pleasure. And then when all of the darkness inevitably comes up in my life, then what do I do? If I don't have the foundation, then I call it a bad trip. But my teachers taught me early on in my journey that what is considered to be a bad trip in a psychedelic culture, for example, is considered to be an essential healing experience in the sacred plant medicine traditions. It's the same thing, but the intention, the setting, the human experience, the cultivation, the discipline is completely different. That's another difference between the modern psychedelic world and the sacred plant medicine traditions, is that in our psychedelic culture today, it's more about divisions and all of those aha moments, but in the indigenous traditions, it's not about divisions. Divisions can happen, but it's that innate state of truth, of heart-centered openness. That is the real practice. It's not divisions, but it's the openness towards everything that is occurring. The openness of the heart. So we just have a few minutes left for our today's talk, and I hope that this was insightful and beneficial for all of our friends who are joining us for it and who will be viewing it later. And we will continue this series, and we'll engage more on this topic. So please write to us. You can send us a message. either to our email info@paititi-institute.org, or you can connect with us on Facebook or Instagram, and let us know what topic you're interested in for us to reflect on in our future sessions. And so thank you so much, Robin. This was a wonderful
Yes.
discussion. I enjoyed it a
Thank
lot.
you, brother.
And so many
Me
blessings
too.
to everyone, and may you engage with your life in an intentional and heart-centered way. Much love to everyone. Take care.
Much love. Thank you, guys.